Okay, so, well, welcome everyone to this evening's event at Policy Exchange. I think I know many of you, but for those I don't know, I'm Chris Yu. I'm head of the Digital Government Unit here at Policy Exchange, and I run all of our policy work on technology, data, and the internet. So this evening's event is about the Raspberry Pi. I'm not going to spoil the story. I'll let our keynote speaker do that. But suffice to say, I saw one of these in action in Cambridge last autumn. I was at Silicon Valley, comes to the UK. And, you know, I'd seen this on the internet, and I kind of seen pictures of it. I thought, well, it's kind of curious. When I saw it in real life, working and doing some pretty amazing stuff, I was blown away. And I thought it would be a good thing for us to bring down here to Westminster and talk about with all of you, partly because the journey is so interesting, and partly because the reason for doing this, the kind of rationale, the driver, is phenomenally important. It has big implications for society, for the way we teach our kids, the way we learn, and for the future of the economy. So tonight, the way we're going to run this, in a moment I'll ask Eben Upton from the Raspberry Pi Foundation to do a keynote presentation on the device itself, the story, and why he's been spearheading this. After Eben's talk, I'm going to bring a few people up to the front for a panel Q&A on the issues raised. So in addition to Eben, who's the founder and trustee of the Raspberry Pi Foundation and responsible for the overall software and hardware architecture, we'll be joined by Alex Bradbury, who is a PhD student at the Computer Lab in Cambridge, and he runs the Raspberry Pi software team. We have Jason Julian from Broadcom. Broadcom manufacture the main parts in the device. And we also have with us Michael McKeveney from the soon-to-be-launched Hackney University Technical College, which is a new 14 to 19 school opening in Hoxton in September, specialising in health and digital technology. So extremely relevant to have that conversation with the educators and some of the people who'll be pushing technology education in schools. So we'll have Q&A. We'll wrap up after Q&A, and with a bit of luck, there'll be time for those who want to stay and have a go on the devices, see what they're capable of, to do that. And then we'll try and close fully at about 8 o'clock. Okay, so without any further ado, I'll hand over to Eben.
See if we get this right. Hello? There we are. Thanks, Chris. Hi, so my name's Eben Upton. I run this thing called the Raspberry Pi Foundation. We're based in Cambridge in the UK. We're kind of a spin out from the university. And the thing that we've been spending about the last 4 years doing is building these things that you can see at the back, which we call the Raspberry Pi Model B microcomputer. I thought today I'd talk a little bit about how we came to think that building a very small, very cheap computer for kids was a good idea. I'll talk a little bit about the journey, a little bit about some of the trials and tribulations that have happened to us along the way, and just give you an idea of where we are now and where we hope to go over the next year. So I guess Raspberry Pi, for me, has its roots about 6 years ago when I was finishing my PhD at the Computer Laboratory in Cambridge. I was working alongside that to pay the bills, I was working as a Director of Studies. Now, the role of Director of Studies in Cambridge is effectively to coordinate the undergraduate teaching in the subject for a college, and also to go and find new undergraduates to go out and, if you're a good DRS, to go out and see schools and encourage people to sign up, and certainly to interview people in December when they come in the door in December. Now, I was really chuffed to be a DRS, but it actually turned out to be a slightly dispiriting experience, because what I found was that in the 10 years between me coming up to Cambridge as an undergraduate and becoming a Director of Studies, what had happened was we'd seen about roughly a halving in the number of applicants. So we have about 80 places in a year for computer science at Cambridge. And we got very used to having a very typical Cambridge level of oversubscription. So maybe 500 applicants, a 6-to-1 oversubscription ratio. And of those people, the people we let in, and I'm sure quite a lot of the people we rejected, had a very deep knowledge of the functioning of one or more computing platforms. So these are people who had been programming in assembly language, maybe on the BBC Micro or a ZX Spectrum, if they were my kind of age, maybe a Commodore Amiga or an Atari ST. And so they came in the door, and the first thing we often had to do to these people was to kind of break them down, and convince them that they didn't know everything. The computer scientists in the room, we used to use a thing called functional programming to do that. A programming language called standard ML was very effective at it, certainly broke me down. And then having broken them down, we could then build them up. Now, the thing about this course is that we have 60 weeks of contact time. We have 60 weeks of face time to turn somebody from a sixth former to somebody who can start a PhD. We have about 20 weeks a year. Now, to make that work, it's extremely helpful if when people come in the door, they have some level of understanding. Now, what we'd found by 2005, not only had we seen a halving of the number of people applying, but the assumed level of knowledge of those people was often lower. Many of these people who we were admitting had only done maybe a little bit of web programming. And there's nothing wrong with these. These are still bright kids, but it does mean that we have to spend a significant amount of time certainly in the first year, bringing it up to a level that we'd been able to assume. So a group of us at the computer laboratory, this was becoming a problem for us. And we looked around for reasons why this might have happened. And there were lots of hypotheses as to why children aren't programming to the extent that they did in the 1980s. Some people suggest that, say, modern computer games content, the modern computer games industry is on the same scale as Hollywood. Its budgets are on the same scale as Hollywood. A game like Modern Warfare 3, when I was a child, I could write Pac-Man, so I could write a game which was recognizably of comparable quality to the sorts of things I could go out and buy. These days, there is no way that I could write as a child or even as an adult with less than $20 or $30 million, anything that would compare to a modern AAA title. So there's this idea that maybe children have become demoralized, or maybe children have become distracted. But I think the big thing that the hypothesis that we settled on, those of us who founded the foundation, was that it was really much simpler than that. We had an ecosystem in the 1980s of machines that you could, you wouldn't necessarily buy them to program on, but you turn them on and they go beep, and you can start programming. And it's kind of I think to use this year's meme, it's a choice architecture thing, right? That the default thing you do with these machines is you program them. You may choose to put a tape in and load a game, but the very first thing you can do when you turn them on is program them. And vast numbers of my friends could at least, as a child, could at least write that two-line program, 10 print I am the best, 20 go to 10, or something much filthier than that, and go into Dixon's and type that into every machine in the store, and then hit enter on all of the machines, and then run out of the door and leave the shop staff looking around. So what this meant was these were incredibly primitive machines, and they were incredibly hard to program, but they had no step at the start. There was no barrier. You did not have to choose to program. And what this meant was that in my generation, everyone who, in the UK, who had any aptitude for programming was likely to discover that they had that aptitude. There's a very high likelihood that they would kind of do what I did, which was to start with that two-line computer program and end up working in the software or hardware industries. And Cambridge had become very, very, very fat and happy on the back of this stream of intelligent, self-taught, self-educated young people. Now, starting in the early 1990s, what happened was that this ecosystem was eaten from two directions. It was eaten from below by games consoles. Now, games consoles, by their very nature, by their business model, are not programmable pieces of hardware. They're usually sold at a loss, and therefore their manufacturers are relying on their control over the software that goes onto them to recover the subsidy that they put into the hardware. So those are not programmable, and there are a vast number of other non-programmable devices, and I would include devices like a lot of mobile phones and tablets. Although you can write software for them, you don't write software on the device. You write software on another device for them. So they're these are non-programmable devices. And from the top, this ecosystem was eaten by the PC. Now, the PC is an awesomely programmable piece of hardware. And in a lot of ways, for the experienced programmer, the PC is a superior platform to these old platforms. Most of the tools are readily available, particularly now we have the internet. These tools are readily available. You can download them. They're free. There's documentation available for free. There are communities in which you can discuss any problems you're having. I mean, I remember as a child having to use the interlibrary loan system to learn about computers, right? And this is just things that I can barely even believe. So the problem with the problem with the PC, though, as a programming platform for children, is that it has this little step. You have this 10-minute. You have to the choice architecture has changed. The presumptive thing you do with the PC is not to program it. You have to make a positive choice to go out and download tools for it. And this is a little 10-minute step. It's like kids living 10 minutes from a fantastic playground and they never make that 10-minute journey. And so very large numbers of people don't discover they have an aptitude for programming and they don't fall into it. The other problem we have is PCs are just not that ubiquitous. People tell us, why are you building a computer? Everyone has a PC. That's simply not true outside the comfortable middle classes. There are large numbers of households which have nothing that you would recognize as a general purpose computing device. Even families that do have them will often have the family PC, and the family PC is a precious thing in the same way that the family car is a precious thing. The family uses it to do family stuff. And if you let your child muck around with it, and the child breaks it, then you're out of PC. You've got to go down PC World and pay someone 100 quid to fix it for you. So we had this hypothesis that what had happened was there had been programmable machines and they'd gone away. And so we sat down and we thought, well, could we make a programmable machine? Could we make something to fill this niche that used to be filled? And could we make it appealing enough to children that they would want to get their hands on it? So we decided we wanted to have something which was, first of all, it had to be useful. It had to be fun and useful. It had to do something other than be a programming device. Because you have to remember these machines in the 1980s were bought for other reasons. They were bought to play games on. They were bought by parents for children to do schoolwork on. They weren't necessarily bought to program on. So it had to do something interesting. It had to have flashy graphics or something. It had to be reasonably robust. It had to be a thing which the child could own themselves and could shove into a school bag and take backwards and forwards between home and school 100 times and have little chance of damaging it. It had to be programmable, obviously, so it had to be a thing which was bundled with all of the tools that you would need to program it. And finally, it had to be cheap. And our notion of cheap, we thought, had to cost the same as a textbook. So we thought $25. Which shows that we know nothing about how much textbooks cost. But it did give us this fantastic stretch goal that we then spent. This is something that we've been doing since like 2006. So this gave us this fantastic stretch goal that took us the best part of 6 years to reach. So we tried a bunch of different versions of this device. Starting with things which barely had more power than the machines that we had in the 1980s. And what we discovered was children don't find those interesting. Children need something which is recognizably modern. So we've gone through a series of iterations of this. About 2008, the group of us who were pursuing this idea, that's a mixture of people, 6 of us, academics and local businessmen from Cambridge. We decided that the idea had enough legs that we incorporated a charitable foundation to pursue the idea. And we were kind of trundling along, and in our minds we were thinking, we're trying to solve this very parochial little problem, this problem that Cambridge has got. And so as we're trying to solve a parochial little problem, our volumes are going to be correspondingly parochial. So we thought that we would maybe sell 10,000 of these. That was our kind of guesstimate. Well, our real guesstimate was 1,000, but in our wildest dreams, we thought 10,000 units. And we were trundling along very, very at our own pace, not making enormous progress. And what we really wanted to do, because we're very nostalgic, we really wanted to put the BBC brand on this. We really wanted so badly to put the BBC brand on this. We wanted to call it the BBC Nano. And we used to have these meetings with the BBC, and what we discovered is the BBC can't do that. The BBC could not do the BBC Micro today because it's a state-funded entity. It can't go out and compete in the computer industry. So we had these fruitless meetings, but the last of these fruitless meetings was with a chap called Rory Cathlan-Jones, who's a BBC technology correspondent. And he said to us at the end of the fruitless meeting, he said, it's a cool idea though, could I take a video of you holding it up? And I was down there with one of my colleagues, David Braben. And he said to David, will you mind holding this up? And we'll record 30 seconds of you saying what it is. 2 days and 600,000 YouTube views later. Rory did a second piece on his blog along the lines of what the hell just happened there then. And this really, it alerted us to the fact that there was enormous demand, that this wasn't a 10,000 unit thing, this was potentially a much bigger thing, and a much bigger thing outside just the market of educating children, something that could be of interest to adults who want to hack with computers, something that could be of interest in the developing world. And it also made it clear to us we'd accidentally promised 600,000 people that we would build them a $25 computer. So the last year has been a story of us working as hard as we can with the support of a vast number of people at the computer laboratory and at Broadcom, who are still my employers in my day job, to turn this thing from an idea with a prototype that was oversized and overcost and underperforming into something that we can ship. We've talked about all this. We have a website, raspberrypi.org. we write pretty much everything we do down on this website, and that's been simultaneously a blessing and a curse. It's been a blessing because people have been enormously supportive. It's been a curse because when we've said we're going to try and get this out on day X, then on day X plus 1, it's provided journalists with a lovely free copy, and we've continued to feed the journalists for the best part of a year on this. We ended up, we realized around Christmas time that we were, that there was no way that as a very capital constrained charity, there was no way that we could afford to build these in large enough volume quickly enough to satisfy our anticipated demand. So we were extremely lucky to attract the attention of two giant British PLCs, Electra Components and Premier Farnell, who trade as RS Components and Element 14 in the UK. These are giant electronic component distributors, formerly catalog companies, and they agreed not just to distribute these for us, but also to commission the manufacture and provide the capital for manufacture. The upshot of this has been that we launched on the 29th of February, took 100,000 orders on the first day, which was kind of staggering, took down both companies' websites, which made us popular. They forgave us. Discovered that we had to get a CE mark in order to sell electronics, which was fun after we'd commissioned 2,000 of them already, and we didn't know whether we were going to pass, but we did. Once that had happened, I think the first units went out in the middle of April. As of today, there are 200,000 units in the wild, of which about half are shipped into the UK and half are shipped overseas. By the end of Q3, we expect 500,000, and by the end of the year, 1 million units in the wild. Now, at the moment, most of these are going into the hands of people like me, nostalgic early middle-aged geeks. We hope eventually, once we saturate that market, and it is a very large market, we will, and all of this has been done on the basis of rationing to one each. So there are a number of people who would like more than one. So once we've saturated that market, we very much hope they'll get into the hands of children. They are getting into the hands of children, but currently only the children of nostalgic middle-aged geeks. But even that has been enough to generate some absolutely fantastic footage of, we put out a call for pictures of your children using Raspberry Pi, and we were expecting sort of truculent teenagers. We got toddlers. Some of those programming languages we have at the back, particularly MIT Scratch, which is on the machine at the left, is really suitable for kind of 5 and up. Then the intention is to provide a very smooth curve, is to provide those languages, all as standard features of the device, from 5 and up, Scratch, 8 to 80, Python, C++, you know, the whole curve, to provide all of the experience that you can get with a computer on one single platform. So that's kind of where we are. We very much hope that this coming academic year is going to be the year of, I guess, what we've called the enthusiastic physics teacher. The teacher, not formal curriculum adoption of this sort of stuff, but enthusiastic teachers off their own bat, taking these into schools and experimenting with them, either with the curricula that they've already been using on desktop PCs or new stuff. One of the interesting things is that unlike some other offerings in this area, we don't come bundled with a pedagogy. We are just a cheap piece of hardware. We're just trying to do one thing, make computers cheap enough that every child can have one. So we're hoping that this year we'll see some of that. That will get us some experience. We're going to be running a lot of contests. You know, we're interested in providing children seeing this as something they can do which is genuinely lucrative. As a child, I was one of the things that motivated me to learn computers was I thought I could make some money doing it. You know, there were stories in the media of teenage game developers, 15-year-olds with Ferraris in the driveway waiting for their 17th birthday. You know, and I've actually met some of these guys and they are real, which has been another nice thing about Raspberry Pi. But you know, we want to create that idea that children will have a local incentive, not a global incentive, not a long-term incentive to develop their technical skills, but a very immediate short-term incentive. So we're going to be offering systems of prizes, and then the hope is that, you know, there is obviously an enormous opportunity in the overhaul of the ICT curriculum. I don't think that we would want to push these into the hands of every child, but we certainly do want to make these units available to people who need a cheap computing platform to implement the revised ICT curriculum. So we see ourselves kind of as an enabler of some of these changes. I guess that's all I probably have to say in the way of remarks. I do hope that we'll get a chance to play with these units a little bit later. And I guess we could proceed to the panel.
Eben, thank you very much. Phenomenally interesting. I have to say, I never went into Dixon's and did that, but I wish I had. So
you wouldn't tell us even if you did, right?
no, well, so maybe if we get the other members of the panel up here for the Q&A. Just arrange yourselves as you see fit. And before I take questions from the audience, maybe the others on the panel would like to quickly introduce themselves.
Good evening, I'm Mike McKeveney. I'm Vice Principal at Hackney UTC. As Chris said, it's a new 14 to 19 technical college which is opening in Hoxton, and our specialisms are digital technology and healthcare technology. The view is that in 4 years' time, when the students have finished with us, they all go into employment, education, or training, or off to higher education as well, to basically do what you've done.
Take my job.
Basically, yeah.
Fantastic.
Okay.
I'm Jason Julian. I'm a Director of IC Design at Broadcom in Cambridge. It was my team that actually designed the chip that's in the middle of Raspberry Pi, and I guess ultimately we want to be the beneficiaries of the output of the schools that take on this kind of idea.
Okay.
So I'm Alex Bradbury. I'm a PhD student at the Computer Lab at Cambridge, and also work on the software stack for the Raspberry Pi, and yeah, to try and give time as I can.
Okay. Excellent. So I'm going to open it up for questions from the floor. So who would like to go first? Yes.
Hi, I'm Charlie Ledbeater. I'm co-chair of something called Apps for Good. I'm Charlie Ledbeater. I'm co-chair of something called Apps for Good. We're trying to encourage young people to learn to program using mobile phones with some success. I'm just very interested in how you've managed to reach your cost target. I mean, how have you managed to keep it so cheap? Because that's the kind of thing that they sort of do in India and we think we can't do.
Okay, so Eben and then maybe Jason.
So I think there's this word, and I'm going to mispronounce it. I think it's something like jugad or something, which is hacking. This thing that's come out of India, this idea of trying to build minimum sufficient technology rather than gold-plated technology. So, we've got a number of things that come together here. One is we are using a very cost-effective SoC. So the processor that we use in the device is extremely cost-effective device that's very, very highly integrated. I'm sure Jason can talk about that a little bit more. So we integrate almost all of the functionality of the device, apart from the network functionality, into a single chip. I guess the other thing is, obviously there's a lot of cunning design, but the main thing is a lot of attention has gone into the business model, into the relationships with. Generally, the problem you have is you either go in at high volume immediately, but it's hard for a little organization doing something like this to go in at high volume because you need a large amount of capital. And so typically you have to be a for-profit organization, so you then have to give a return to your investors. The alternative is you try and grow it from a small starting base, but the problem is then you're expensive, and then you never get the volume you need to drive the cost down. So what we were able to do, a number of the trustees threw money in the pot, so we were able to get enough money together to build 10,000, which is still not volume from the perspective of a chip manufacturer, but we were able to get good relationships with all of the chip manufacturers, not just Broadcom, that allowed us to buy chips at large volume prices in smaller volumes initially. Now, of course, we do have lots of volume, and we're probably actually buying our chips at prices which reflect the volume that we're putting through.
Because it really is phenomenally cheap. Like, if I walk into PC World and try and get my hands on a mains adapter and a keyboard and a mouse, it's going to run me more than the device itself.
Yeah. Absolutely, and one of the things we've done is really to focus on making sure that all of the additional equipment you need is generally equipment you have. So using the television as a display, your mobile phone charger as a power supply. Yeah, there's no point in making a $35, $25. These are $35 ones because they have networking. There's no point in making a $25 or $35 computer if it needs $100 of peripherals you don't have. If it needs $100 of peripherals you do have, that's no big deal.
It fits into other things that you have, not
That's the intention. TV for display, mouse and keyboard, which you can generally scrounge up, SD card from a camera maybe as storage, and then a mobile phone charger as a power supply.
Okay. Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, and the actual chip used in the Raspberry Pi is a mobile phone chip, and mobile phone volumes are so high that the people that we sell our chips to care a lot about price. These things aren't expensive. A lot of the cost in mobile phones is things like the displays and the memory, things like that. The actual chips themselves are probably no more than $30 worth of a $500 phone. So by doing, I guess, a bare bones board like this, where you're not wrapping all those other very high-cost components, then you can deliver it. And as you said, if you can pick up the TV and the keyboard, then that's a lot easier. Yeah, but it's certainly not true that the chips themselves are expensive.
Okay. Other questions? Yeah.
Hi. Could you just explain for somebody who's not hugely technical exactly how it works? I may not be the only person asking that question. So, but we understand it works through computers and through TVs. Exactly how does it work and what is it?
Yeah, and is it magic?
Okay,
Alex.
so I mean, I suppose if I describe how someone would actually use it, perhaps. So you would give this to children, either use it in after-school clubs or in the classroom or at home. You can use it so that, as we have set up at the back, you plug it up to plug in a mouse, a keyboard, hook it up into a monitor, and you can get a desktop display which looks not totally dissimilar to what you'd be used to on a desktop machine. And then you would go through programming materials to educational materials to learn about how to program using programming languages, which Eben mentioned earlier. Of course, beyond that, so that's one way you could use it. Beyond that, due to the fact that it's low power, low cost, and that it's very small, you could use it to build. You could build it into projects on a more permanent basis. So if you had an idea to build a robot, then hook it up to robots, motors, sensors, and so on. Then that could be a project which I think quite a lot of children would be excited about.
Interesting. And can I ask, so we've got the kit and we've got the programming language and it's super cheap and so on. What have teachers got to do with this stuff? So I buy the kids in bedrooms will have a go, but what have the teachers got to do?
We'd like them to act as facilitators, but most of the time we want the students to just do it on their own and to find a way there. I mean, we're working with employers who are saying that there's a massive dearth in programming language understanding. And if they can support us with the languages that they need and provide employees to support and guide the students, they're incredibly resilient young people. They we're talking about 4 or 5-year-olds having a go of it. They say a magazine's an iPad that doesn't work these days. It's remarkably like that. We find that the young people can sit and actually do things that amaze me most of the time, and I'm, not that old.
Yeah. Have we got some teachers in the room? Just quickly. Yeah, what's your take on this? Maybe we can get the mic over.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, okay.
Hi, my name's Richard Patterson. I'm the co-director of Tower Learning. We're based in the East End. And our main work is overseas in Africa, teacher training, STEM subjects. But in between that time, we're STEM ambassadors and we volunteer in mainly in East London schools and stuff. So having come from computer science and IT in schools and Ofsted and all those routes, I wonder what are the views of the panel on an ideal curriculum whereby a child who's not necessarily able to just pick it up and try it for themselves, someone who needs a little bit of help, what would be the ideal curriculum and situation in the school to sort of help them to do that in order to maybe go to Cambridge and do A-level, not A-level, do computer science at Cambridge, and not necessarily the computer science route that I was asked to teach when I was a teacher in IT, not necessarily that route there.
Okay, so right here in 2012, what's the ideal computer science curriculum as opposed to what we've come to know as old school ICT or old school computer science? Who'd like to go first?
It looks like am I being volunteered? We are finding that showing them the end product, inspiring them, this is what you can do with it, and then scaling it back from there. Obviously not just linking it to computer science, it has to be, I don't want to go into educational jargon, but we're mapping it. So we're talking about the projects with robotics, that immediately links into physics, I'm thinking, and not just in the after-school club arena, but actually in the curriculum as well. There are some people that we work with who are saying if we can create, if the students can use this language, we will employ them after 4 years, or we'll mentor them to go on to university and pay their fees too. So I think it's the curriculum itself, it has the Raspberry Pi or the whole computing side of it has to be permeated through every subject. You know, could you write a program that would be able to tell you the beauty of Shakespeare? Or could you write a program that could link to data logging for, you know, chemistry experiments or even some biology experiments to give you the optimum level of bubble production during the photosynthesis experiment? I mean, we think there's quite a massive link here to every other subject that we offer within the curriculum at the UTC in itself. That's very broad brush. We can talk later on if you want about the real specifics. Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else on ideal curriculum?
So I guess, I mean, so as I say, we try very hard not to promulgate some sort of way that we'd like these devices to be used. I mean, my personal fantasy curriculum for teaching people about computing is something that takes people from building a transistor all the way up. So it's more an I mean, I think that this is an engineering curriculum, right? That you can start by showing somebody how to build a transistor, and once they can build a transistor, you give them a transistor. Then you build a logic gate, and once they can build a logic gate out of the transistors, you give them a logic gate. You can. I believe that I think MIT have a curriculum which is very much like this, which I think can be applied at the undergraduate level, but potentially can also be applied in a simplified form at the school level, which takes you all the way through from fundamentals to build. And every time you get up one level of abstraction, you get that for free as a given, and then you build up to the next level. What that gives you is it gives you people who understand all the way down. It gives you people who understand the underpinnings and can get all the way up. So that's like a fantasy curriculum for me. I'm not sure how implementable it is. I think that it will suffer from the fact in a school environment that it requires expert teaching. So if you're going to deliver it in school, you probably would need industry's help. But there again, there's a lot of evidence. Industry understands there's a problem and can be called upon, at least in some areas, to deliver some of this.
Okay. Who's next? Clive at the back. And if people could just tell us who they are and where they've come from as well, that would help.
Department of Energy and Climate Change. Could you just say a bit more about the software environment for this? I'm still having a bit of trouble envisaging what it actually is. So it's got presumably some sort of operating system. Is that something we'd have heard of? It runs programming languages. Are they things you would have heard of, like BASIC, C, Java? What? And is it open to third parties to write things for it? Do you have to form alliances with people, or is it all open systems, or what? There's a bit more on that would be interesting to hear.
Okay, so I can say some stuff about that. So basically, yes, it's an open platform. The operating system we run is Linux. In fact, the distribution is Debian, which is a fantastic community-driven project. Anything which will run on Debian on the ARM platform, which is the type of process we have, you're good to use. So there are ports of Java, BASIC, C compilers, Python, Scratch, ML, which Evan mentioned earlier. Any programming language you can think of which has an implementation which works on ARM, you're good to go. Now, in terms of so that's your operating system. Now, what it actually does when you first turn it on, that's to a certain extent, that's up to the user. I mean, currently, we boot it up, and you have a simple command line prompt, and then you can log in, you can do start X, and you get something like a traditional terminal. There's lots of interesting arguments about whether it would be worthwhile to boot into something more like, on BBC Basic, and I'm on the side of mostly giving. In my medium term, I'm working on providing tools so that people can build their own sort of customized distributions, because in reality, there's going to be a whole set of people who have their own interests. People at sixth form colleges who want to do web development, people at primary schools, and I want to help them to tailor it to their needs.
Yeah. And we've got some set up at the back, so after this part of the session, there'll be a chance to go and have a look for real and see what it looks like. Okay, let's take a few more questions. So, why don't we take, we've got quite a few hands, take a few. So Chris, and then the gentleman here.
Chris Francis, IBM. I know from the blog, which I've been following as much as I can, which has been fascinating, you've come across many other issues than you've covered, including international trade agreements on the taxation of electronic components, the copyright and licensing models of encoding technologies and other things like that, some of which, such as Open Standards Policy Exchange, has also had debates on. So my question is, from the policy perspective, can you give us any ideas about what could be done in the policy environment and the government environment to make projects like yours whichever the next one might be, whether it's biohacking or agriculture or 3D printing or whatever it is, what would make doing this again in other areas easier?
Okay, so hold that thought and then let's just take another question from the gentleman on the end of the row.
Keith Searing, I'm a similar, although slightly older, computer nerd, judging from hair colour. I'm intrigued by the concentration on the education curriculum. Do you see yourselves as being like the Meccano for the engineering world, that kids actually had things to play with and learnt engineering themselves rather than being taught it?
Okay, great question. Let's take one more. Okay, Esther, just there.
Hi, I'm Esther Moore McLaughlin. I'm from Sony, but I'm asking this question as the mother of a 5-year-old girl. And it's one about girls and young women getting involved. So we've mentioned Meccano. You know, I did the run program before I played Hungry Horace on the Commodore. So I did a little bit of that, but left it behind. And looking at my daughter's colleagues, peers, you know, the boys are already kind of, you know, taking plugs apart and wiring and getting into all of that, and the girls are having fantastic fantasy games with unicorns and all the rest of it. You know, I'm wondering whether the notion of enabling girls and young women to get more involved in this came up at all in your discussions, and whether you had conversations at all about, I'm not suggesting you made pink circuit boards, nothing like that, but you know, I'm just interested.
It was tempting for Raspberry Pi, right?
Yeah.
I'm just interested as to
Pink
whether
is
that
more
was
expensive than
something,
green.
that came up for you.
Okay, so 3 questions there. One on what do we need to do in terms of policy to make this or the next thing in this spirit work better? Number 2, is this the Meccano of the modern age? And number 3, if it is, how on earth do you get young women to have a go? Who'd like to go first?
I can certainly speak to the licensing situation. I guess there's no real easy answer to that one. We work in the semiconductor industry. It's highly litigious. It's very important for us to keep the work we do secret, simply because if we opened it up more, everyone would want to try and sue us. And we do sue lots of people, and we do get sued a lot. I don't see, I mean, this is American industry. I don't see there's a way around that, unfortunately. On some of the other questions, I mean, I think we're doing pretty well on the ladies in engineering front at Broadcom. I mean, my wife leads the design team that actually drew out the chip. We've got several others, and that's compared to these 6 out of 250 in my year at university. I think we're probably around the maybe 5 to 10% level. But it's certainly, I mean, it's quite clearly an issue. It's how do we get more girls into it? I don't know. I have 2 daughters as well, and I do wonder how I'll get them to be as excited about computing as I was when I was their age. But I'm going to try. You know, I guess Raspberry Pi is going to give me an opportunity to see if that aptitude exists in them, see if I passed it on in some way.
Mike, what's your take on this? And maybe, you know, for my interest, what's the balance of girls and boys going to be at your school?
It's 50-50 as is at the moment. I mean, we're still taking applications for young people